shit, but I reset up everything in there.
Here we go to the wild blue yonder.
Detecting.
Okay, we're live on Facebook.
Yes.
Ah, you saw that vector ride. Live. Live and uncut. Oh boy. Here we go. Let's see. Are we officially live now? Hey! We're live. How much fun is this? Well, all right. Welcome back to the new exciting. Did you know that? So obviously you now know why I couldn't do my previous 2 weeks ago, and Joseph couldn't do his. We were busy finishing up that wonderful 4R8 for you guys. Super excited to have gotten that out now and get it in your hands. I really feel this live Boolean is a game changer for quite a few artists, especially for those toy people, collectible people, things like that. Um, so I want to kind of, you know what, open this up too for some questions. Obviously, we've been getting emails and some support questions for certain things. So there's something very in particular you want to ask a question. I saw somebody notice we did an update to Dynamesh. That is definitely true. We also there were some things in the stream we didn't show that are in this version. So we've made some changes. Also, there's a magnifying option. There's a streaks option. There's the ability now when you pick up an alpha, you can actually rotate it and adjust it how you want. So I want to touch on those as well. Okay, but I also want to just reiterate anything from what we covered in that stream. So, an example, this is a simple example for me creating like a yo-yo with ZBrush and literally using, like, for the most part, 6 shapes to do it. So I'm going to throw on my live Boolean here again. Okay, and something else that we didn't touch on the stream that I also want you to be aware of. We also gave you guys the capability because when you're dealing with booleans, you could run into issues with your particular piece of geometry. You might have which coplanar, which in essence on one surface and another surface are literally sitting on top of each other. Those are difficult things for a boolean system to figure out. So it's called a coplanar. You have non-manifolded pieces. So what we've actually done, whenever you do run an issue, which I myself and Joseph have now made jokes like we've pushed this code so much that it's really hard to make an issue now. But you have the capability to show coplanars, and you can turn this on, and you can see I have coplanar surfaces within the strings. So I got strings sitting in the exact same location. So this shows you, hey, this piece has issues where there's one piece of geometry and then another piece of geometry sitting in the exact same space. So that could give you some issues when you're using a Boolean operation, more for when you guys want the result, not during the rendering process, right? So these options here are allowing you to look in it, and I can look at just a solo and look at one subtool at a time. So you got your next in preview. You notice when I click next, it actually jumps to the next subtool that's giving me the problem. So we really tried to streamline this so I can keep hitting next and previous, and I can see the subtools that are giving me the problem, which just makes sense because when I did this little string, I made several in the same location, and I just started manipulating and playing them. So there's going to be a lot of my strings sitting in the same part of the world. But I want to go with making something simple like this. Just let's walk through this together because it's something very simple, and I want to make sure we all understand the hashing out this live Boolean process, and it's something that all of us can make, of course, right? So I want to start with a cylinder. Who doesn't? Okay, and I want the cylinder to be looking maybe at the Z space. Okay, so I want to actually down here in initialize, I maybe want to align it to the Z as an example. Okay, I'm going to turn on my polyframes. I'm going to say, hey, I don't want that number of divisions. I'm going to drop that down. Okay, and then I'm going to make that a polymesh. So, and of course, now when you guys hit WER now, you get your handy dandy Gizmo 3D. right? So I'm going to take myself out of perspective because I like when I'm working on especially something that's kind of hard surface, I like to look straight at it. Okay. So I know a lot of questions have already been asked about getting the strip process where the connections are happening. Yeah, we're fully aware that people would love to have that. I would love to have that. So it's something we obviously got to look into in more detail. Okay, so it's on the board. So don't worry, it's on the board. But you got to remember, this is a non-destructive. So when I start boolean this, the edge doesn't exist yet until I actually make the piece of geometry. So obviously there's things that we got to look at doing that. Okay. No way am I giving the dress gizmo. No, it's not happening. Which one though? Are you talking to the Pandora box one? I can't focus. Like if you probably sit with it for maybe a couple seconds, it would make sense. But I'm not doing it. I'm sticking with the default. So, anyways, I'm gonna maybe just change the size just a bit and say, yep, that's good enough. Now, I can now go about this in several ways. We can do what I just did, come up here and grab another cylinder, right, and start working with that and have this cylinder actually open up and have an inner radius. But this is the point of our new primitive system, okay, to have that interactive primitive system. I want to now say, let's just duplicate this because it's going to become a new subtool, okay? And I'm going to hit my gizmo, and then I'm going to hit this little gear, and now I have these options, which you all now know. This is where our deformers live, and these primitives. So I definitely like to do the cylinder here, so I can select this, right? And I'm going to turn this off, and you can see what we have here, right? So how many spans do I need across? I don't need any, but I definitely want an opening, okay? Because I want to use this as the cut-in part for maybe my yo-yo. All right, and now let's turn it back on. Let's turn on transparency so we can see what's happening here. So I'm going to say, let's go back to our Gizmo 3D. So you can do it this way by hitting that little gear. Okay, and note that the gear's orange now. So when that gear's orange, that means I've gone in and I've either got a deformer still on the mesh, or in this case, I've been playing with the cylinder 3D. So for example, if I go back to Gizmo 3D, you can see that that little gear is still orange. That allows me to, I can size things up, right? Change this down, but I can still go back to the gear and say cylinder, and then I can still play with all these radiuses that I want. Okay, so you definitely have the capability to bounce around and do some things. So I'm just looking to do something maybe like this, maybe something like that. Now, obviously the beauty now of the system is I'm going to create a start. Okay, so this is my major important piece of this yo-yo, and I want this piece now to be a negative. Okay, so of course when I turn off Polyframe, I can see what that's doing, and now we can live adjust it. So this is nice, but I'm going to want to do say something like I want to turn on dynamic subdiv. So we've added this now because of several of you guys, the users, have said, hey, I'm using Dynamesh and I didn't know dynamic subdiv is on. So when you hit just D on a mesh that does not have any subdivision levels at all, you are now going to get this and say, yeah, you know what? Anytime I hit D with something that doesn't have subdivision levels, I hit yes, and then this is what I get. Okay, so for those that don't know, okay, who has never used dynamic subdiv? Because this should become a major part of your friend, especially with this live Boolean operation capability. So in geometry, under dynamic subdiv, you have this dynamic option. So you're dynamically looking at your subdivision levels. So right now I'm looking at 2 subdivision levels because that smooth subdiv is set to 2. And then if I switch it to 4, now you can see it's smoothed that even more because now it's dividing it 4 times, but not actually dividing it to the mesh itself. I'm looking at a representation of what it would look like if I divided this 4 times. This gives me a lot of flexible and freedom to do many more things. Okay? So if I say solo out, you guys are looking at this, so we can just look at this piece, and I go, well, I don't like, it's getting a little too soft, so this is where I'm going to use my handy dandy now Z modeler. I have symmetry on. I'm going to say crease. I'm going to say complete edge loops. I'm going to crease that edge, right? And I'll crease that edge and do the same here. We'll crease those, right? And I want the same thing on this side. I want to crease that. So now if I unsolo it, okay, and turn off Polyframe, you can see that's now creating a very harsh point. So let's also smooth out this piece. Okay, so I'm going to hit that, and you can see, ooh, that looks beautiful. It's lovely. Okay. So what I want to do is also maybe crease these edges here. Okay, along this row and then along this row. So just so you see other ways to do this, instead of using even the ZBrush brush, I'm just going to change this and maybe let's put 45 degree and hit crease, and you can see those edges right there were creased automatically. Okay, because this is saying the degrees, anything 45 degrees and up, automatically crease. So this becomes very important because there's a lot of times where you guys have very complex pieces and maybe you want a one-click solution to crease off certain things. Okay, so that's where this can come in handy. Now me would never see something, this is way too crisp. Everything is very, very crisp. So I definitely want to adjust that. So because I have creases and I'm not adding edge loops, I'm going to turn my crease level down to say something like 2. And I'm going to turn this dynamic subdiv up to maybe 4. And you can see it starts getting softer a little bit. Okay, so for this purpose, we're going to use a different shape to create our softness. Okay, so I'm actually just going to keep these at the default. And the next piece below, I'm going to say, let's play with this one and drop it to 2, right? And then this smooth is already at 4, so if I turn it off and turn it back on, it updates. And see, now I'm getting a smoother transitional point right there. Okay, and that's because I now, if we look at this piece by itself, I'm kind of softening those edges. So if we go up another level, so you can see they're rounding a little bit, almost they already have a chamfer on them. And that's because I'm controlling how I want that creasing to look. So I'm saying only hold the creasing for 2 subdivision levels, and I'm telling it to actually divide 5. So for level 1, level 2, okay, it's holding them very crisp. And then now, of course, because we have live booleans, right, I want to make sure this is centered. Okay, so that's what this little, we're all probably used to that in the map finder. If I click on that, it's centering the gizmos. So if I hold the Alt key, you can see it unlocks, and I can move my gizmo way off in the world now. I can rotate the gizmo, rotate it several different ways, right? I'm going to say, whoa, whoa, whoa. I need that centered on that center cylinder so I can adjust the size, right? So I'm going to hit this little thing. Okay, my gizmo's now still kind of all crazy right now. Okay, so I'm going to hold the Alt key and reset. If I didn't hold the Alt key, it would actually move my cylinder to the piece to how it is in the gizmo. Hi from Barcelona. I'm going to be in Barcelona in actually August with some family. So we can now see adjust freely and do what we want. I can even come here and do a mirror and weld, right? And what you might be thinking that's doing, right, is what axis do I want to mirror and weld on? So looking at the Z, I'm going to say mirror and weld along the Z. And you can see that changes that shape just a little bit. And I can now say, let's do a symmetry along the Z, okay, which I now have. And I'm going to switch to insert a single edge loop. Okay, and I'm going to turn off the polyframe. And you see I can actually watch this change. So here, let me undo this. See right in here, watch this transitional part. So by me adding another, see, I can go very sharp, or I can transition up. And that's happening because I am adding another edge loop through here, right? Which is going to change how this piece is looking along those edges. Okay? So continuing this process, all right, instead of beveling the edging here, okay, I can continue to work with this. So the next piece that I wanted to add, okay, I can again duplicate this piece. Wonderful. I'm going to click my W key, gives me that gizmo. I'm going to hit the gear and I'm going to grab a sphere. And now I've got a sphere. and I'm going to size that sphere up so it's a little bit bigger. Okay, and I'm going to use the third option, okay, which is intersect. And now I can do stuff like this and say, what kind of yo-yo do I really want to use? Yeah, maybe one that has a little bit more bevel like that. So I'm actually using this sphere as my intersecting piece to only manipulate those ports where it's intersecting. So this can come in very handy for you to think about this in many different ways, right? And then continuing this process, right? I can say now, let's switch to another new brush. So we have now IMM primitives, and there's IMM primitives H, which stands for half. I'm just reading a question, newbie question. Of the Boolean have the loops when finalized? Yes. So all the loops will be there when I convert this. You're going to have any of the geometry that's being used, okay, is going to be what the resulting mesh actually is. And the only geometry we change is where the Boolean actually, where it was intersecting. So we'll make it and then you can see it. So we're going to hit the IMM primitives. We now have along the top, this is new, we have an IMM selector. Okay, this is going to allow me to select any pieces that I want. So I want a sphere, let's say. Okay, I'm in symmetry mode here. Okay, I want to have maybe this be a different piece. So what I'm going to do is go back up to this top cylinder because I'm just going to draw right on this and draw that out. Okay, and you can see that's being affected. And what I want to do is I want to make sure symmetrically it's happening. That blue line is my z-axis. Go to transform, switch to Z, and now you see there's the two red dots. Since we have some new people in here, I want to make sure that I am covering all this for you as well. Where the mesh geometry meets Mr. Rue, that's intersecting geometry, and I'll show you when that comes. Okay? So I'm going to draw this in, and now I have two of them. And you can see now this is also being affected by that sphere, right? Because that sphere is doing intersect. So what I want to do is I want to split this off from my main piece, right? So I'm going to go to my split. I'm going to use the split on mask points or mask points, or I can even use split to similar parts. It really doesn't matter which one I use here. Just don't use split to parts. Split to parts would make each sphere its own subtool. I want those two spheres to stay as one. Okay, so I'm just going to do unmasked. Okay, you can see now I have them here. I have this here. I'm going to unselect that start. Okay, now I got to decide here. We'll just rename this to spheres so I know which one's what. Okay, and do I want all this, these two pieces, to be affecting this? Right? I got to figure that out. I don't really want that to be affecting this, so I'm going to move these down. So I just click this little down arrow key, and when I update, you can see what we get now. All right, so I'm going to switch back to my gizmo, the W key. I have symmetry mode, and now I can just use this to push this in. But I want these to be a subtract. So our first icon's a union, our second icon's a subtract, and then now I can adjust this as I want. Right, so you can see this is all I'm doing to create this little yo-yo. Okay, and then again, I want to maybe add a cylinder in here, right? So I can definitely do that. So I've got cylinders here. Insert a cylinder. Okay. Do I want this to be positive or negative? I'm going to let this one be a positive. So I'm going to just go ahead and duplicate this. Right. And I'm going to draw right out on this. There's that piece. Right. So what I'm doing is I'm drawing on the spheres. And then now if we look at this, I can say, for this particular subtool, I only want to keep these pieces. This is all I'm really concerned about. Okay, so I can now and go ahead and delete hidden, and then now I have these pieces to manipulate. We'll turn off our polyframe, and now I can make these be an inner piece and give me that look. And then now this geometry right here, right? It's made of, if we go to solo, right? There is triangles here, right? So these are all going to one point. So I'm going to solve this by switching to my Z modeler, and I'm just going to say I want to insert an edge. Oops. Right here. Oh. Can click happy. Right, so here, this right here, I want to just insert an edge. Anywhere in here, it doesn't matter. And then when I smooth, you can see this now is getting a lot nicer because now the pull of triangles is pulling actually on this edge loop, not this edge loop out here, right? And that's kind of the look that I'm trying to go for as an example. Okay, so we can continue this process and I can continue to have some fun with this, right? So the beauty here is I'm just using simple shapes and having some fun here, but we can also get a little more complex, okay? So what I want to do is maybe use another piece, okay? And I want to be able to, let's say, array mesh that. All right? So I'm going to actually come out of symmetry so we can just look at this in a different set, okay? I'm going to append, and again, I want to show multiple ways to be working with these tools, okay? So this is not like, you got to do this on the next step. So I just want to show a couple different ways so you guys can get ideas here. So even if I appended something like this, right? This is clearly not what I want, right? It's a cone, right? I want a cylinder is what I actually would like, right? So I'm going to say, switch on to my gizmo, okay? I'm going to select that gear, all right? And I'm going to say I want a cylinder. And you can see that cylinder is being remembered from the last time. Okay, so I'm going to say cylinder me, right? And now it's sitting in the middle of the world, right? And then now I can say, well, I want this one to actually be closed, right? And I want to switch this rotation to be maybe at a 90-degree up. And you can see it says 90-degree down there when you're rotating. So anything you hover over here, we're going to give you what it does below. Okay? So I'm going to now say, all right, let's crease it. So remember that little trick I showed you? I can just say my crease tolerance and say crease. And I know those are all creased because I want to smooth this out so I get this as my result, right? Okay? And I want to start playing with this piece a little bit. So maybe let's make it a little skinnier and a lot taller. Maybe something like that. Okay? And I'm now going to go to something like array mesh. Okay? And I want to tell ZBrush, we're going to array this around. I'm going to turn the floor on again. And we're going to look, because these lines right here become important to us, right? So the green is your Y, the blue is your Z, and then the X is your red. Okay? So that'll allow you to do that. Okay? So what I want to do is I want to use this and rotate it around. So I'm going to say array mesh this. Okay? I'm going to lock the position and lock my size. Okay, so it locks the position worldly. And I'm going to say how many repeats we want. Let's start with 8. Okay? And what I want to do is tell it, let's rotate around what axis? The Z. Right? So if I do this, and I'm going to say 360 degrees. And now we're getting something like that. Okay? And if you notice, I can move this in the world. So let's unsolo this and say, let's bring this out here, right? And now let's have some more fun with the live Boolean. Let's make this a subtract, and you can see what that's doing. It's starting to cut into the surface for me. I actually want it to move out this direction. So this is the beauty of the non-destructive live Boolean. I can kind of play with this and figure out, where do I want this to actually stop? Do I want it to stop there? Do I want it to stop here? And then this is an array that I can continue to play with. Even if I was to rotate this, you can see what this is doing, right? Even if I was to scale and make it skinny, whoops, Not rotate it. I don't want to rotate. I want to scale it and make it skinny like that. Then I can have something like this. So we can do quite a bit here and have a lot of fun with this, right? And do something like, I don't know, even like that, right? And this is the point of this live Boolean system is, I made the joke in the stream, but it seriously is like as a child, me watching Bob Ross work and making, decisions based upon that, right? And I can move this anywhere in space and keep moving it around. So you can see I'm just moving this and watching and see what do I get as a result. Pretty cool, right? And then because it's an array, I can go down here and say, let's append another version of that, right? And then we're going to mirror it along the Z. And now it's on the other side, right? So the benefit to me here, again, if you look at this, this is my polyframe, right? I have only really one mesh. So if you look, it's 34 polygons up here on the top, okay? So whatever I do to this one piece of geometry, it's doing to all these instances. So this first stage is doing this repeating of the one piece, right? So it's repeating it around, okay? The second stage, I'm telling ZBrush to actually take this repeating of this one piece and clone it to the other side and use it. So that's why I've just turned on mirror the Z, right? Because I know I want to go along the Z axis because it's sitting in the blue line. So that's what ZBrush does. So the beauty part we have here is I can manipulate and mess with this. I can even take any brush, right? I can even take a move brush and start saying, well, what do I want to do with this, right? I want to start messing around with this piece and start having some fun with this, right? And I can manipulate this however I want, right? So you can do all this at any time that you want, okay? So I don't have any spans of geometry in the middle, if you notice, right? So if I want to have some more fun with this, we'll do a little of a Z modeler, and we'll insert multiple edges, and let's just add more spans through here. That's enough. And then we'll switch back to the move, right? And then now I've got more pieces to move. So here, we'll turn off Polyframe, and we'll smooth it, and then this is what we're going. So now I can, like, this is endless, right? Whew. This is what I mean, the Bob Ross thing. There, it's your own world. Do whatever you want with this, right? It's a lot of fun to go about this system and then just play with it and manipulate it, right? And do whatever we want with this. And then I'm deciding at what point I want my dynamic. So the questions are being asked, what does the geometry look like when you convert it? Okay, someone's got the emoticon of Bob Ross. Yeah. Yes. Absolutely. Yes, someone's asking about centering the array. Of course, I can use my gizmo, right? If I don't hold the Alt key, this little home key will put the piece. Remember that, it's the piece. And this is, my array is going to all change because I've set up my array based upon, I started at the center and I moved it off the center, right? So if I wanted that to not be centered, right, I can click this and then see the array's gone because it's actually sitting now in the middle of the world, right? So, but I've been making adjustments based off of, I've already done moving off the center axis of the world. So you can absolutely, that's what this little house is. That little house moves the mesh to the center of the world, or if you hold the Alt key and hit the home key, you've got now the gizmo at the center of the world, right? So all these have two actions. There's a lock action and an unlock action, right? So the reset, right? If I start changing things, and if I did say something like this, and I hit reset, see the arrays update based upon the reset now back to the gizmo being set to the world axis, right? I don't want that. I only want to reset the gizmo. So this is why I would hold the Alt key and reset the gizmo, but don't have the mesh also reset back, right? So this reset resets the gizmo back to being perfect in world axes, okay? So now I want to be able to do that, right? And then obviously the home is going 0, 0 part of the world home. Okay? And then this is using masked purposes. So if I even mask off a portion, right? So you can see that tip is unmasked. If I click that, see the gizmo automatically moves to that portion. So I can move this however I want, right? And it's appreciating masked surface portion. Okay, so remember there's a lock and unlock. I'm just using the hotkey Alt to unlock this. And then letting go of the Alt key locks it back up. So you can sit here and actually click on the lock, and now you can do what you want. When it's unlocked, it's only the gizmo that's being affected, nothing else, right? When it's locked, then you're actually affecting the gizmo with the mesh. Okay, so moving the gizmo to home, and then the mesh moves to home. Resetting the gizmo, if it's not set to the world perfect axes, it resets the gizmo and also resets the mesh to try and sit within that same axis update. Okay, so there you have it. Okay, so this is going to allow you to do whatever you want. Okay, and then continue to move. So even though this is array, I can move this around and position this where I want. This is important why I've turned on lock position and lock size, right? Because if I don't turn on lock position, see, it's just a completely different array. I'm not locking, in essence, keeping the space equidistant in the array. I want to make sure that these are staying locked at all times, right? So this is what I have now with lock position, lock size. I turn this off. This is, in essence, unlocking stay relative to all positions, right? And the lock size, say lock size. Okay? So that allows me all this flexibility and freedom. Okay, so I saw someone say I wasn't centered. It's because my beginning mesh when I started, I didn't have it centered into the world. That's all. So again, if I append, here we'll append this cylinder here, right? I'm looking, this is centered at the world, right? I would need to make sure everything else is also centered at the world and I haven't played with. And then this is normally how I would work. So I say I want this, and maybe I stretch it out and make it skinny, right? And if I want to array mesh this now, this is centered at the world. Okay, so it makes it easy for me to go to array and say, let's array mesh this. I'm going to lock the position and lock the size. So I will always want the position to stay relative among every array, and I don't want the size to physically change when I'm doing this. Okay, so now I want to tell it I want to array along the rotate, right, along the Z. So I'm going to say 360 degrees. Okay, and then now how many repeats do I want? Right, and then that's sitting center of the world. And then now because I have this, I can start moving this. So this is kind of what I did. I started at the center of the world, and then I moved it off, and then I started adjusting things so I could get stuff like that. Ooh, look into the array eye. It's funky just to watch it for sure. You can do stuff like this. And now I have another array that I can use on this piece, right? I can turn this into a subtract and start pushing it in and then push it out, right? And if I want this to be centered back in the world, right? I don't have it. I have it locked and hit the house, and now it's centered back at the world, right? So this is sitting perfectly centered at the world, and now I can decide from there, I'll do this. I'm pulling it up out of the world. So here I'll turn on Polyframe so you can see what's happening. So I'm just moving that up in the world. Cool. So let's delete this and let's look at back to, this is the yo-yo, of course, that I was making. Okay, so if you notice, there's a start group for the main portion, and then there's a start group for what else I'm doing here, right? So I'm going to turn off that start group, and I'm only going to make the yo-yo so people can see what my geometry is. So looking at the geo, again, let's go through this. I'm going to turn to solo mode. That's what this geometry looks like. Here's my sphere. Here's the little torus I was using. Here's those two spheres. And then here's that cylinder that I'm using. And then here's my array mesh piece. Okay, so what is this going to look like result-wise? So all I have to do, again, is down here in the Boolean section. Am I using dynamic subdiv? Okay. And then if I click this on or off, right? That says, do I want to use the dynamic subdiv when I make the result? I say make Boolean, and then now along the top you see it's being made, and then here's my yo-yo. And then you can see the geometry, what we have. So again, this is just a very simple result to just give you guys the idea. See, all the interlining geometry is exactly what I had. The only geometry that's changing is where it's actually transitioning. That's the only part it's actually changing. Okay? So we start looking at things that are a little more complex, like this is a little chip that I made. It's got arrays in it, right? So if we turn off live Boolean, we can start doing things like this, right? So there's a lot of different pieces in here creating that, okay? Even to the point where I can get those little rods right there to work, and all this is going to work. So the thing about the live Boolean, it's not just about using simple geometrical shapes. We can use anything, right? So you can use a subdivided surface, you can use multi-million polygon meshes, you can use whatever you want, right? So if we even grab this handy dandy dog, right, and I start dividing him up, okay, so let's go, there's 2 million. Here, let's go crazy. Here we'll go up one more. So there's 8 million. So now I have an 8 million polygon mesh that, of course, I can sculpt on, right? So here we'll turn on symmetry. So I got on both sides. So we can get those details. And now I want to use another shape for a Boolean, okay? So I'm just going to append something, again, any shape that I want, right? Which can be a sphere if I want. And then I can subtract from that. And now I'm subtracting on an 8 million polygon mesh, right? And working with this and seeing what I'm doing. And of course, I can even go to the point where I would like to see, if we throw some surface noise on here, what can this look like? So I can even do something like this. I can say, all right, let's make broken concrete. So make a little bit of something like that, right? Make the scale a lot bigger. How strong do I want this to be? Hit OK. And you can see even that's being shown, right? So as I move this, so this is the benefit, right? This is a sculptural change now that I'm doing to the surface, right? And it's doing it on an 8 million polygon mesh. But we can continue this idea in this process, and I can grab anything we want here, right? I can even grab the dog again if I want, okay? Let's grab the head. Let's have some fun here. And let's divide it up a little bit. And let's even turn this into a Dynamesh. So I'm going to delete those lowers. I'm going to go to my Dynamesh. Okay, there's a new feature in Dynamesh, which is Subproject. So I know that was spoken about, okay, in the back. So Peter, ZBrush is not video card driven at all. We don't even use the video card one bit. It's all CPU, like you said, driven, just for the people out there. Okay, so I'm going to be going about this and going through it. And I see a RAM question. Yeah, I have about 64 gigs, but I also do this same exact thing on my MacBook Pro, which only has 16 gigs of RAM, by the way. So we work really hard to try and streamline this as much as possible. Okay. So I'm going to say no project. Let's just Dynamesh this. Not good enough. Let's add some more resolution to this. Still not good enough. Let's keep going up here in resolution and Dynamesh that. Okay, so now I'm at 1.1 million. That looks pretty much the same. This is watertight. Let's go back to that amazing dog piece. Here you go. And let's append that head, right? And now I have this head, and let's turn that into a negative. And now I'm literally putting the head into the dog as a negative. So this is the benefit to our system, right? Is that I can work on anything like this, right? And I can even continue to go, you know what, let me start having some fun with this head, and let me even sculpt on the head. I can switch back to the dog, right? And I can sculpt on the dog. Seeing everything is live updating. Sculpt negative, smooth it out. This is the benefit, right? In a non-destructive system. I can keep playing with this and figure out, is this what I want? Okay, so it's not all about just a simple shape. And again, this is, like I said, this is 8 million, so I'm playing with around 9.3 million. On my notebook, I did experiments as we were coding this with 30 million polygon mesh being used with like another 25 million polygon mesh, and it was fine on my MacBook Pro again with 16 gigs of RAM. Okay, so I have this capability to continue working with this process. So the live Boolean system definitely opened up a lot for myself, for a lot of other artists, right? And you can really do some other things. So let me load another model that I have here that I want to show something with, just to start thinking about what else you guys can do. I did a little experiment with this one and tried using array mesh to get my results, right? So in essence, this is the Rocketeer backpack, right? So the Rocketeer backpack has kind of a little slant here on those rocket parts. So I actually took the time to figure out, you know what, I'm going to make a version of the rockets that's dead center, that's sitting perfectly vertical, and then I array meshed it over, and I did the slant in the array mesh. And that way I actually kept symmetry, and I was watching both these being created. So it allowed me to create all the pieces. I don't have the original piece, unfortunately. I don't think here on this computer. I'd have to find it. Those are negative booleans. Another boolean cutout, because they actually have inner portion, right? So getting these right here, I'm using this piece right here as a negative. So you can see I just sculpted this up, and I duplicated the main shaft, and then that's giving me inner portion as well. So you can do things like this as well, and I'm using, like, this is a curve brush along here. This is a brush I actually made. This little, I'll zoom in closer, this little mesh brush right here. So that's actually an array. So here I'll load that one so you guys can see that. Here's my woven cable. So you can see this. This is from an array mesh. So there is my original piece, right? And if we go back down to my array, you can see what I have here. And I'm just telling it, right, to go 56 times in the Y 360 degrees. That's all I'm doing here, right? And it's very low polygon. It's a simple strip of geometry that I've just duplicated off and kept it the same. And then what I did to convert it into a brush, okay, I said, you know what, make it a mesh. Okay, so I don't want extrude on. I'm going to say make a mesh, and that gives me the mesh. Everything has the same poly grouping, right? So all these blues are the same everywhere, so forth and so on. Now I just said, now I want to make that into a brush. Okay, so for the sake of just size, I went to deformation, I unified it, so it puts it back. I resized it because my array was really big. I didn't want it that big. And then I just took this, right, and did the handy dandy create insert mesh brush, say new. So now we have the IMM selector above the top. Okay, so I can say, you know what, I don't want this to be its own brush. Okay, I want this to go into another brush here. I'm going to turn off our auto saves for now as well. So we're going to go here to my settings. I'm going to say undo. We can keep that. Quick saves. Let's turn this pretty much off. I'm going to put it at 600, which is 10 hours. So it doesn't need to autosave. I'm not worried about my autosaving right now. So this is great, but I want this to go along a curve, and maybe I want to add it to another brush, right? And specifically, I want to add it maybe to this IMM curve brush that already has all these pieces up here. Okay? So what's great now is I can copy and paste things, right? So, or I can even say, let's just take this, right, and go to brush and say from mesh, right? And then now this is going to add that cable there. Okay? And then I can say here, go to the create menu, and this is where now I'll have copy one mesh, copy several meshes. So this will work for all your insert mesh brushes now. Okay, so I can copy one mesh. I can even go and let's grab something else. Here, let's grab this IMM Basics, right? And I can say brush, and then I say, do I want to paste and replace? Number one, do I want to replace that cylinder that's selected right now? Because this is what the selected piece is, this cylinder right here, right? Or do I want to paste and insert? So it's going to insert it right next to the cylinder, or just a paste append. So I can say a paste append, paste insert, right? And then you guys can have these all where you want them. So you can see I'm copying these over. So I just did that in essence with this, but I grabbed it, okay? And now this is along a curve, and then there you go. Now I've got this happening, right? And now I need to just fix the rest of this. So you can see it's not lining up quite the way that I want, right? So that's in the stroke palette. Again, the curve, the stepping's off. So I just need to find the right stepping. I'm going to try 0.8 first just to see what we get. Click on it. It's not quite what I want, right? I want to affect this, right? And noticing this, I actually have too many spans, right? I actually don't need a whole span because it's not lining up the right way I want it. I actually don't need this top portion, right? Because I only need these two, right? That's it. Because here, we'll delete so you guys can see. If I now copy this, right, that's how I can get that repeating pattern. So now I have a version like this where it has 3. Or I can say, you know what, this is actually the version that I want. So let's go to the brush again, say from mesh, and now it's added that woven one. So I have a completely different one now selected along this curve, right? And see, now I can manipulate this, and you can see the gap is not right. So I go to stroke. Let's try, I'm just guessing, let's try 0.8. Let's update that. It's getting close. It's not, it's overlapping a little too much. Okay, so then I go to this, and I just start playing with this and finding the perfect gap that I want, right? I start working with this. And in the brush palette, under modifiers, I want to start playing with this as well. So right here, this curve resolution, I'm add a little curve resolution to this, right? So you can start getting things like that. Let's now keep playing with our stepping. Let's try 0.85. See how that looks. We're getting close, so maybe 0.8 was it. 0.8. Yeah, there you go. 0.8 was it. And then there you go. I just made a carbon fiber looking tube piece from originally an array mesh, right? But now I can copy and paste things, put them on different brushes. So you weren't able to do that before. Okay, so this is definitely a fast transitional workflow. And then now this is attached to the brush. And I'm going to say, well, this one I messed up on. I don't like that one. You can now go to your brush and back to the create menu. I can say delete this mesh, right? I'm going to delete that mesh, and I come up here and I update, and it's gone, right? So now you have all this capability to do this stuff, right? So during the stream, we were talking about a lot of things, you know, especially for this IMM selector, which is nice and handy. So if we do a model kit, right, it's got all the pieces up here, right? And I want to start manipulating this and maybe even start using this with booleans, whatever it might be, okay? So if I'm drawing this out, I'm drawing it right on the demo head. So instead of drawing on the demo head, which is making it the same subtool, right? So you can see it's all part of that same mesh. I need to add the capability to, I want those pieces to maybe be a union or even a subtract. All right? Carbon fiber makes everything better. So true. Okay, so I just saw a question from Red Hots. I like that name, Red Hots. So Red Hots is asking a question. Let's answer that question because I see this come up a lot for those that are using ZBrush. For those that have never used it, welcome. Welcome. So the question's coming up about using this, right? And so let's grab this. This is definitely will be a lot more visual for you people, for everyone to see. So you see, this just looks like some kind of necklace or something like that, right? So the question came up with, when I change this curve stepping, let's just do 1.5, okay? That's changing the gap between each one of the pieces. So you can see there's a little bit of a gap now between the pieces. So it's dropping along the curve, one of these little pieces, not every exactly. So you see that red, black, red, black, red, black? So if I put that back to 1, you'll see, okay, that the pieces are being dropped at that red, black transition, right? So you can see in between each this black line right here is one piece. In between this red line is the next piece, so forth and so on. So this is controlling where they drop in space along the brush. So I'm telling to have a bigger gap. So I'm telling don't drop every like red. Don't in essence don't drop correct between. Don't have the one piece just sitting perfectly in the red and the black. Put a little bit of a gap and put half of a gap between each piece. So that's what the 1.5. Obviously, if I change it to 2, right, you're going to see something like it's going to in essence skip every other is what it's going to look like, right? So you're going to, the gap is equivalent to the next piece. Everyone understand that? Yeah. Anybody? Just I'm going to hold for a moment there, just so I can make sure everyone's there. Wow, look at the voting. Why I'm doing that? The live Boolean for the next Did You Know That is running away with it. All right. Okay, so the stretch that I forget, Red Hots, you brought it up. Okay. This is not doing what everyone thinks it's doing. Okay, what the stretch is only useful in this situation when I've adjusted this curve step. That's really the only point to use that stretch. So what Red Hots is bringing up in the brush palette, okay, when I go down here to the modifiers, okay, here's where all insert mesh brush stuff will live. This right in here will live. Okay, this stretch here is telling ZBrush when there is a gap based upon the curve, actually stretch the piece across the gap. So you can see that piece just got stretched. Right? That's what that's for. I'm telling it, hey, skip every other, right? So now it gives me 1, skip 1, 1, skip 1, 1, right? And then going to brush, I'm actually now telling it, no. I want you to actually stretch across that skipping. Okay? And then there you go. And then an overlap slider is telling it to overlap. So I play a little bit of the slider and I go and touch the curve and you can see it's starting to overlap. That's what this overlap slider. Here, if I turn it up all the way, you can see it's really overlapping now. You can't, to the point where you can't even really tell what those are. Okay, that's the point of the stretch. So there's really no point in turning this on unless you've played with this slider here. Right? If it's sitting at 1, there's really no point in turning that on because there's no gap. There's nothing to stretch across. Okay, Red Hots. Cool? That's what this is all about, people. Did you know that? And since we're doing that, have you guys ever taken a look, well, this brush, right? And now along the top, you see, we're going to get into the thing I was trying to get into, but now I'm on Captain Tangent. So you see this Vine 1 of 4, Vine 2 of 4, Vine 3 of 4, Vine 4 of 4. Have none of you ever thought, why are those 1 of 4, 2 of 4? There's a reason for it. And this is a very strong feature that when I go visiting people or visiting artists, going into studios, working with them, when I show them this, they're like, ugh. Especially, think about in this scenario, if I'm making something that has plant vegetation or different types of leaves or trees, whatever it is. If you guys update this, have you ever noticed that when you select this, the inconsistency along that? So notice, look, this one is being repeated in a row several times, right? So this is Vine 3, right? So Vine 3 is being 1, 2, 3, 4 times in a row, and then it's switching to Vine 1 and going through it. This is actually allowing us to switch between multiple pieces of geometry within our IMM selector. Okay, so to give you guys another visual, let's do this together. Okay, let's just click on this necklace link. because it'll just be visually easy to see. Okay, so I got a necklace link, I got a bracelet link, I got a strap, and a wide strap. Let's say those are the 4 pieces, the next pieces, right? So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to dock the brush palette. This is why I love these live streams, man. Tangent fill. I am Captain Tangent, by the way. I'm going to make a, it could be a emoticon. There you go, Kyle and Kingsley. There's my emoticon, Captain Tangent, because I always go off track. So we have a brush that's selected. That's an insert multi-mesh brush. We know that because we can see them all here across the top. Now you also can hit the M key, which is the old way. You can see them all here. But there's going to be an advantage to this new IMM selector along the top, and we're gonna go through it. So I have this wonderful curve, right? And now that I've clicked it, it's updating because now I have the necklace selected. So I can select any one of these and it updates. This is amazing. Okay, but what I want to do is I don't want the same thing happening throughout this. I want it to be swapping between these 4 along the curve. That's what I want. Okay, so right now this is the selected necklace link. You can see right here, necklace link is the selected piece. Below here, I'm going to say variation slider. And I'm going to say how many variations along the curve do I want? Well, I want necklace link, there's 1, bracelet link 2, strap 3, and wide strap 4. So I want 4 variations. Okay, so I'm going to say 4 variations. Bingo. Let's touch the curve. All right, Paul, that stunk. That did nothing for us. What the heck? Well, there's a reason for that. Okay? The slider next to it tells ZBrush how do you have a variation through that. In what sense? Do you want it to go forward through it and come back forward, go forward through it, come back? Do you want to maybe start with the end, go backwards, come back to the end, start backwards? Or do you just want to random it? And this is my universal symbol for random. Or Paul's crazy right now. So this variation slider, let's just put it to 1 and now jump on the curve and you can see what it's doing now. Now it's swapping through them, right? It's going to this one and then to the next one and then to the strap and then the wide strap. And then it goes back to the beginning one, right? It goes back to this one, then it goes to this one, back to that, so forth and so on, right? And then of course putting it at 2, okay? Goes the opposite. It's going to start with this and head back to the strap and then work this way through them. And then 3 is a variation. So you let ZBrush do its magic, right? And it'll now just decide. See, there's 3 of the same in a row. Pretty cool, eh? So of course, this is using, okay, something also to the insert mesh brushes. It's using a try group. So you can even have these repeating differently in the try. Let me see if I have, because I'm on this new computer, so I don't know if I have my file that it would be good for you guys to see this. I don't see it. I might have to get a different one. You know what? Please hold. Talk amongst yourselves. Let me get another flash drive because I want to show you this. Hold on. I got to get another flash drive here. Okay, because I'm pretty sure it's on this one. If not, it's on a hard drive. Okay, just note for everyone out there. You probably want to get more organized than me. I just put stuff all over everywhere, all over flash because I do so much sometimes traveling. So a lot of my stuff is scattered. One of these days, I'm going to sit down and organize all this stuff. Just wait. Here we go. This is what I want. We got it. Bingo. Okay, so think about the concept here. So I'm going to load another tool here. Let's load this guy up. Oh, I think it's the brush. Oh, yes, it's the brush, not the tool. All right, so here we'll load the brush then. We'll load that up. And go to this one. And here's my handy dandy Western belt. Right, so if I click on this, you can see I'm getting, here I'll go larger so you guys can really see this. You can see I'm getting a belt that I made. Okay, but notice the middles are actually being all swapped out. right? And it's because if you look along these, there are 8 different variations of this tool belt, right? So you might be here. So there's one, see the middle piece, 2, 3, right? And so forth and so on. So I've adjusted the middle piece. So in essence, what's going on here is I've made a tool that has 8 subtools, right? And in these 8 subtools, the top belt port and the bottom portion are identical, right? The middle portion is also identical, but then at each subtool, I'm changing it up. Does everyone get that concept, or do you need me to load the tool? Because I could probably find the tool. All right, let me load the tool. I don't know why I bother asking. I'm just going to do it. Let's see. Hold on. I know it's on another file. This is what happens when you don't stay organized. I'm gonna do it. I feel it. It's gonna happen this year. I'm gonna get organized this year and put everything in one location for me. Okay, let me load this guy up. There we go. So it should be in here. Let me get. So talk amongst yourselves. Western belts. Do we need them? Do we not need them? Westworld? Not Westworld. All right, let's see. This is what happens when you go on wild tangents. Don't think that's... Nope, that's not the tool. Found the brush again. Tools. Here we go. Found it. Found it. Okay, we'll let it load. Oh, I crashed it. Oh, this is a beautiful piece by Ski during the beta. Let me launch this tool again so you guys can see what I'm doing here. So we'll start fresh. I'm a big component of starting that fresh. Let's load that tool. Let's see. And tools. Western belt. Here we go. Okay, so here's the tool. Okay? And think of the concept again. I want replacing. Okay, so here's all the subtools. Right? Here, I'll turn on Polyframe mode. Right? So you can see this polygroup, this poly, so there's 3 polygroups. And all I'm changing is kind of the quality of the middle piece, like less bullets, the bullets are moved, damage to the belt, right? And then I'm making a brush, and then I'm now doing all that repeating pattern that I originally showed you guys. Does that make sense? Right? So I got this piece. There's all the same. Every subtool has 3 polygroups. The only thing that's changing is that middle section's just sculpting ability has changed, right? So now all I have to do is tell ZBrush, okay, this is how I want it to draw out, okay? And then I'm going to go to the stroke and say I want to put it along a curve, okay? But what I want to do is first make this an insert mesh brush, okay? So I'm going to say B and not make just insert. I'm going to say multi-mesh because I have 8 subtools total. I'm going to click on that, right? And then ZBrush is going to give me all 8 along the top here. Right? So you can see the last one is selected. I'm going to go to the first one. Okay? I'm going to say I want this one to be along a curve. So I can select that out, right? And then now I can draw out a curve. Okay? And you can see what we're getting. So first things first, okay, before we get in the repeating part, I don't like what's happening here, right? So that's a curve resolution thing. So I go to brush. Again, I'm going to my modifiers. I'm going to up this curve resolution just a bit. 3 is probably enough. So now it's sitting better. I want to make sure that they're welded together so that when I divide, it doesn't separate. So that's in the brush palette because I'm affecting the mesh. I'm going to say weld points. So if now I click this curve, everything's actually welded together. Okay, and now the last step is I don't want to just repeat this one. I want to repeat all 8. Right? So this is the one it's selecting because that's the one I want to start with. Okay, so I go to Brush, I go to Variations, and I set it to 8, and then I say I want it to be random. I'll hold on that, right? So I have 8 variations, and I want to randomize it. So then there you go. There's my brush. So I just recreated it in front of you. It's that easy. Okay? So it doesn't stop there. Okay? So when you guys are doing insert meshes, right? Let's load this guy again. All right? And we'll divide them up a little bit. Okay, so again, insert mesh brushing. So I really enjoy a lot using this model kit one, right? So I can insert things. So now what's going to happen is, hey, whoa, 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 whoa. You've got subdivision levels, okay? So I can freeze my subdivision levels. I can do that. But if you remember, we'll just delete it for now. I drew this out, right? So this is where we were with the tangent, okay? I actually don't want it to stay on his head. I want it to be its own tool. Then maybe this is also the piece I don't want. So what's great now is I can turn into Gizmo and I can just click now and cycle through. And as I cycle through, wherever I click, we automatically swap it out for you. So this is another there, Bob Ross moment. Yes, that's what I want. It's gorgeous. Okay, so, but I want these to be separate. Okay, so that becomes pretty important to me. So I want to split these. So I'm going to split and say unmasked points, right? And then that becomes a separate. So what Joseph showed, which him and I were like, wow, this is a great workflow with the live booleans, is instead of even drawing on him, the head, or anything else, how about I just append anything? It doesn't matter what it is. I'll just append a cube. Okay, it's irrelevant what it is. Okay, I'm going to size this down so the cube's actually tiny sitting inside the head because I don't really care about it. It's not the cube that I want. I just want to use the cube kind of as the manipulator or the piece that drives everything. The piece resistant. Okay? So let's turn on our live booleans and let's make this a subtract. So you can see the cube's gone. It disappeared. Right? And I want to start drawing on this. Okay, now, the things to think about here is if I start drawing on this, now if I just grab this and start drawing it out, you can see I automatically get a negative. Again, so here I'll turn on symmetry so I get it on both sides. So if I turn to Gizmo here and I start manipulating this, right, you're immediately seeing the result right off the bat. Right? And I can manipulate this now and we can turn dynamic on, say yes, and now I'm seeing what this dynamically looks like as I mess with this and push it into the surface. So this was really, really important to us where we found, oh man, I can just start making pieces that are negative in essence, right? Hello. Is it possible to draw a direction of insert or nano over the surface? Can you expand upon that? I'm not quite understanding. So the question also about GoZ Substance Painter. We don't do the GoZ bridge anymore. The companies now are responsible for it. So, for example, that's what also changed for GoZ Moto. The Foundry now is the one that's responsible for updating the code, all support, and things like that. So that's why there's also probably not a GoZ for Substance and Painter because they would have to code it. So continuing on this journey here, I can now, start cycling through these and see what do any of these look like in a negative sense too now. Right? So this really opened up a lot for us. Okay? Even to the point and say, okay, I like that one. That's good. Let's select a different one. Let's select this one. And I'm holding down the Alt key this time, right? And it's drawing that negative. And then I can position this where I want, and it's giving me the negative result. Right? Because what I'm really drawing on is the subtool with that cube, but because ZBrush sees the vertex points of the demo head, this is where it draws out. It's good to go. Right? That's what it's going to do. So then the thing here to do is start creating brushes that are negative. Right? So here's another negative one. So I'm just drawing that out negative. So it's flipping and giving me the opposite. Okay? So this is what Joseph was showing during the stream for those that watched the stream. He wasn't actually drawing on the piece that was right? He was drawing on some other little subtools sitting there. And him and I have made like things that are just negative. So as an example, let me load my inspired gun of District 9. This is actually the very first piece that I played with. Let's see, Mauser. Oh, you know what? I don't have it here. Of course. Let's see if it's on one of these. I got the Mauser. Oh, I guess I did not have it. Infernal Mauser. Okay, I did not put it on here. It's probably on the fourth hard drive. Oh, here we go. Here we go. Do 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 do. Boop boop boo doo boo doo boo. Let it load. So this is actually one of my very first pieces that I made with the Boolean system. As I got I don't remember what it was. I was just looking at books, and I have a District 9 book, and I was cycling through and you go, you know what? I'm going to make my own District 9 gun. Okay, so if you look at a lot of these pieces, specifically like all these little screws in here, right? All those, all that cutting in there, even along the top here, right? So I made star screws, right? Looking at this, let's take a look. All this is this. So here we'll solo this out, okay? Number one, right? I arrayed it, but if you look, I reverse engineered, right? So that this is the negative, right? Because I'm thinking about, I'm drawing this out, okay? And I want to use it almost like a stamp instead. Instead of a positive emboss, I want to push in. So I just reverse engineered this, so it gives me what I want. Okay? So this is a great way to look at it. And now I can say, I want this. Let's clone this, all right? And let's go to the clone. So to give you guys, everyone, an idea here, let's only look at the one. We don't need the whole arrayed mesh version. Okay, and just so you guys know, it's sitting at the center of the world, right? I can click my little house now, and this is sitting center of the world. So I'll turn on the floor, and I'm sitting center of the world. So now I want this to become an insert mesh brush, okay? And I want to maybe add it to this one here. And you can see I'm slopping through because I have the gizmo on, right? So I want to make sure I have the gizmo off. And I want to add it to the end of this, which there's like 140 here. It's endless, right? And if you guys want to see these bigger, you guys can click here. You know that, right? And you can see bigger. You can see the text, and you can see how big they are, right? And with that said, you guys don't have to keep the IMM selector here, okay? In preferences, in your interface, you can actually move the placement. So there's your bottom, and then there's your left. So if you're a lefty or a righty and you prefer it in different locations, there you go. Okay? So making this again, I'm just going to look from the top, okay? Because I want to draw it out negative, right? So I don't want to see this portion when I draw. I don't want it drawn like this. Because if I'm drawing that out negatively, I would just get a hole, like a cylinder. That's not what I want. I want this is what I want, okay? So I can now go to brush, and I can just say from mesh, bingo, added. Super. All right, let's take this idea, and let's just take something simple, okay? Very simple concept here, just so we can wrap our heads around this. And now I want to start drawing this out. So you'll notice a couple things when I draw out. number one, it's drawing out with what? There's hardly any push being done, right? In there. We'll turn solo off. Okay, I want this to sit at a certain distance. Okay, so every time I draw this out, by default, right, ZBrush is reading the height of this, okay, and always making sure that the very low part, I'm down here like you guys can see this. Hello. So we have a cylinder, right? This, let's say this portion's got that little screw port, and this is the flat. When we grabbed it, it was looking at the whole distance and finding what the furthest depth was, and then it makes sure that depth is always sitting when you draw out right on the top of the surface. Okay? Everyone understand that? Am I losing anybody on that? I'm going to pause for a minute. Yeah? Okay? So what I want to do is I want to, again, use this as a negative, and I want to kind of control the depth of how this draws in. So all I have to do is go to brush, okay? Open up depth, and you can see the depth is sitting at an embed of 100. So I can say, let's put that lower, and now when I draw, you can see it's sitting more inside the surface now. Right? Everyone see that? Okay, so let's redo what we discussed here. Okay, let's append a cube. Let's put the cube inside. Sound effects mandatory. One of these days, I'm going to get the sound effects. That's a John Gunnery. Okay? So I want now this to be a negative. And then now I'm just drawing this out, and I'm seeing it, boom. And then I can say, do I want it that deep? Or maybe not that deep. I want it that deep. And then I can turn on smooth, and that's what it's going to look like, smooth. And in essence, I'm now creating a screw that is a negative result with the booleans, and now I can draw this wherever I want, and even make all of them the same size. No matter how close or far away I am, I'm going to get the same result no matter what I do. Pretty nice. Now, user-defined, because people are asking, can you make that user-defined? Okay, so by default, the insert mesh brushes are reading the normals. And that's what it's drawing off, right? So if you look, the gizmo's set to the way I was drawing it. We did this on purpose because then I can go, oh, I want to play with this a little bit maybe. Maybe I want that. Maybe I want to enlarge it or shrink it. Okay? Excuse me. So you can see this is being aligned to it, right? So at any point in time when you're drawing out, you can hold the shift key and it remembers what that last alignment is. So you can see now I'm doing something like that, which is actually pretty cool. I kind of dig that. Happy little accident once again. Bob Ross. The theme of this is Bob Ross. Right? Now I've got a little bit of an angle to that screw. And it's because this gizmo was originally angled. So a user-defined, again, what do I do to turn this around? Hold the Alt key and adjust this however I want. Right? And then this is how it's going to draw out. Right? So if I start drawing it out, tap the Shift key, see it's changing to that direction now. So this is the same thing, by the way, when we hit the gizmo, for those are also veterans, you can see your transpose is also the way to do that. So I could just click and say, this is the direction I want it to draw out, right? And when I start drawing it out, hold the Shift key, I can start drawing based upon that direction. Okay, so it's the same thing, but now with the world of gizmo, you can just use the gizmo to do it. Hard surface with Bob Ross. For sure, right? Although he was definitely very organic, right? And then so now I can go about this and I can swap through these and I can look at all these. And obviously all this is not set up to be negative, but you never, that looks pretty cool. You never know what you're going to get, right? You never know what you're going to get. So you guys got to start thinking in a negative property as well. And how do you make something that, you know, as we create stuff, it's easier to look at things in a positive way. Right? If we just took, let's just take something very simple, very, 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 very simple. All right. Let's take, let's make a new mesh here, and let's grab, let's go to, actually, we'll go in here. Let's see what we got in here. Let's see if there's any in here that I like. Here we go. Yeah, that could be potential. So I'm going to say, hey, you know what? I want that mesh from the brush. I want to work with this mesh. I want to manipulate it. I want to change some things up maybe for this, okay? So in the brush, okay, I can say to mesh, right? That gives me a cube. Wonderful, okay? I actually want to rip this off and give me. So in the geometry, under modified topology, I can say mesh from brush, and then now I get the mesh. Okay, so when you want to rip it off the brush and use it and insert mesh brush, you got to go here, mesh from brush. Okay. Now, I want to, this is a positive, right? I want it to start being a negative, right? So when I draw this out, I don't want it to be drawn out positive this way. I want to flip it and get the negative approach of that, right? So how would I do that? So this is the easiest way I would say you can do it if you want. Okay, there's multiple ways to do it, but this is probably going to be your easiest way for you guys. I'm going to hide the bottom cap portion, right? So this is what we have, and I'm going to hide that bottom. In fact, you know what? Let's do this even for giggles. Let's do this. Let's do a polygroup, flat island, and let's just change the polygroup at the bottom. Because now I can just say, give me only the green. And there you go. That's what I got. Okay? Now I say delete hidden. Okay? I'm going to turn this into an insert mesh brush. Like this. Let's say brush, insert, create insert mesh brush. Let's say it's a new one. Now I've got this. Right? But what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab a cylinder. Okay, and let's initialize this along the Z. Okay, perfect. Yes. Okay, and I'm going to say that looks, that's good enough. Or maybe less spans, maybe something like 24. You know, if I wanted to be perfect, I would go get the number of spans this has, right? If I wanted to be, I don't need to be perfect though. We'll say 24. Make the polymesh. Okay, I'm going to say Z modeler this. Okay, and I'm going to insert, let's insert a single edge just so you guys can get an idea here. Perfect. And I'm going to repolygroup this, and we'll make that middle portion its own polygroup. Right, so we've got the red, right? We got the blue and then another blue. Okay, let's switch back to this. Okay, clicking on the dot, I'm going to hold down a negative, so I'm holding down the Alt key. Okay, and then now all I got to do is clear my mask and do it again, and ZBrush replaces that middle polygroup. Okay, so let me run through this again. Consider this concept, this idea. So this is like 6 years old, maybe 5 years old now. This is what we called when we came out. We called this mesh fusion actually. So I have a polygroup. And the other thing I have is an insert mesh brush that has an opening to it. So I want to hold the Alt key, because holding the Alt key will, instead of drawing it out like that, right, it's going to flip it and draw it inward. So I'm holding the Alt key and I'm just drawing that out. Okay, and because I drew out on one polygroup and my screw has one opening on it, ZBrush knows that polygroup I just drew on, actually delete it and give me what I just drew out on instead. And then ZBrush will use the Z remesher to close off the gap for you. And now I have this piece that I can use and do whatever I want with this. Right? So this is now a negative piece. Now let's add this. So I'm going to say I want to draw out this way. Right? And let's go brush from mesh. And now I've got this one. Beautiful name. Right? And I got the original all in one brush now, contained in one brush. Let's go back to a little cylinder here with our negatives, right? So I've got the subtool that is already set as a negative. So this is actually going to be drawn out as a negative here, right? But I'm not going to get much, right? Because it's what is it doing? Right? It's drawing out positive way, right? So I'm not getting what I really want. Okay, so I want this is what I want, right? Because I want that to happen, right, when I draw out. So you notice I need to figure out my depth, right? So when I draw that out, nothing's happening. I'm drawing out pieces, but nothing's happening. Okay, so the first thing I need to do with this brush now is let's figure out my depth again. Let's go to my brush. Okay, my depth is sitting at 0. Let's try a little bit of a negative. Okay, so when I draw this out now, what do I get? Right, so here we'll draw that out. Right, am I still getting what I want? Nope, still not getting what I want, so I need to continue editing this and go more negative, right? Because this is a really tall piece as well. Right there, it's starting to get a negative, starting to happen, right? And then I can say, let's just go all the way negative 100. Now we're crazy. Now it's way down there. We don't need it that. That's just nuts. Okay? There, that's more what I'm wanting, right? Brush and maybe a negative 7. Yes. So you can see the piece I can create in a positive, all right? But then I can go that way. How you make the screw the same size? It's all about your brush size, okay? So looking at your brush size, when you draw it out, if you just tap the control key, see I can rotate this and it won't let me grow it anymore. So no matter how far I pull away, tap the control key and you see it snaps to the brush size. So even if I zoom in, I'm drawing it out, control key, and it snaps to the exact same size. So if I wanted this screw on everywhere on my mech, I would save this now, brush, and this draw size would be maintained, right? And that would save with the brush. Cool. So guys, this like, you know, blew the doors open for specifically like people like myself and Drust, and then people like Chi Vang, who did that tank, right? All these pieces, like if you start thinking about this piece right here is also a negative, right? Here's the piece. Here we'll look at just this one, see? And it's an array again, but here's how I created the piece, right? And it's very low polygon, so I use ZModeler, but I went in a negative process instead of in a positive process for the result. And then now I can take this and add it to this brush, right? Draw it all over the place, and we're off and running. So I can take this and even go, just give me just this one, right? Say that's what I want. Brush from mesh. There you go. Now I have it. Okay, go back to that little testing sphere that I'm using. So no, well, we can use him, right? Now I'm drawing this out. Nothing's happening. I need to start playing with my depth, right? I need to maybe drop my depth down a lot more, and then there you go. And now I find the right depth that I want. Right? So the beauty of this, right? Think about this even in the terms of when I started doing this process, right? Let's take a cube. Let's do something a little fun here. All right? In fact, forget this, let's do it this way. Let's do it now the new way. Cube. Oh, it needs to be a mesh. Okay. Cube it. All right? How many spans do I want? Let's just say none across the Z, none across the X, and none across the Y. This is the cube that I want. Okay? I'm going to make it long. Let's size it up a little bit. Let's go this pattern here. All right. Let's look at my floor axis. So along the Z, all right, let's do a mirror and weld. So I get a center point here. Okay, I'm going to do a ZModeler, right? And think about it, I'm just starting to layer things. Layer. Okay, so I'm going to say insert, and let's insert here. That looks good. Okay, let's make sure symmetrically I'm along the Z and transform. So I want on the tip ends. Okay. Right, and now here, let me turn that off again. I don't need undos. I don't need the quick saves, we don't need those. All right, I'm going to pull this out and say, okay, what do I want to pull out? I want a Q mesh, one single polygon. So I'm going to pull that out. Looks good. I'm going to pull that out and have an angle to that. It's definitely what I'm looking for. Okay, great, 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 great. Let's start throwing some creasing on this. So let's do a little crease by PG, which stands for polygroup, or if you're in my world, Paul Gaboury. Come on, come on, give it to me. All right, so I want the rest of this creased. So of course I can take my time and use the brush, right, in here, and I can crease these. So everything is creased now. I'm going to say give me dynamic of 4, but only allow that creasing to be held 2. Right, so now I have something like that. I'm going to say maybe crease of 3. Let's see what that looks like. That's better. I prefer that. That's kind of more what I'm going for. Maybe something like that. All right, and now what I'm going to do is hover over my edge, switch to Insert, Multiple Edges. Let's first delete that edge, okay? And let's just insert multiple edges. Let's say that's a good number. Let's go with that. Okay, and then now I'm going to say QMesh, single poly, and I'm going to boop, and then duplicate, duplicate, duplicate. So now I have this little rail piece, right? And now I want to start getting very complex with like a screw piece, right? And this is again got dynamic on, which in essence multiple subdivision levels. So I made a brush, right? So I'm going to say brush, let's say, where's that piece? This one. And now which one do I want to use? Let's use this. Okay. And I'm going to say I can either draw it out, right, like this. Okay. But what I want to do is I want only one, maybe, and I want to do maybe a negative, right? So let's just draw out only one for the sake of this and say that's what I want is that. Okay, I'm going to split en masse these. All right, we're going to turn that into negative, and then this is what we have. Right, and then now, where do I want that to be along this rail? So this is where I really enjoy the process of, I'm not quite sure. So I started this. This is the start of this little rail I'm making. Then I'm going to go down to our handy dandy array. I'm going to turn that on. And I'm going to say, all right, how many do I want? Okay, so I'm going to switch to Gizmo and actually switch to transpose this time. And what's cool about the transpose line, if I turn on this transpose option right here, you can see this completely changes. You can see there's a repeat and a stage. So I can actually use the transpose line to pull across. And I can say how many do I want to repeat through here. Right, and then get my spacing maybe that I want. Maybe I want that repeating. Okay, and I also want to change this in the world. So I don't want to change the array capability. I want to turn off transpose so I can just change where this is sitting in space. Right, so I can move this and then they're all moving in space. So I might want to do something like all the way down like that. Okay, looking at it now, some of them are disappearing because my cylinder is not long enough. So let me turn this off. And again, I only need to look at this one piece. Okay, so what I really like, what's new, hold down Control and Alt, and it masks everything but these pieces, right? So I know that's masked, right? And watch, now we can just say pull it up. There you go. And there I have the repeating pieces, right? And then of course with the gizmo, I can swap between these pieces, right? And then this one I can see, what does this one look like? Right? And it's just different space. Go back to this one. I can mess with this now, right? So it's our world there, right? So you can see how beneficial it is, and we're staying very low polygon in this sense. So it's really helpful for me to go across the board and start messing around with this and making the pieces. So in essence, that's how that top part of my wannabe District 9 gun, right? All this pieces, right? So this was huge, and what you see is what you get when we actually convert this into the geometry, right? And you can see this has multiple start groups, right? So I can have a start group up here. There's a lot of start groups through here, right? And then I can just tell ZBrush Boolean it. Yes, I want dynamic, and tell it make Boolean mesh, and it'll go through. So we really opened up a new way to go about working this. Actually, let's escape because I've also turned off a subtool. Let's make sure they're all on. So we'll shift click it, and I guess they all are on. Oh, I have only one showing. Hold on, I know what I did. Let me get these guys back. There we go. Then let's make the mesh. Okay, so A, if you have array mesh, we're converting it for you. B, if you have dynamic subdiv, we're converting that for you. C, if you have nanomesh, we're converting that for you. And then we're giving the result, right? And then going on there. Hey, Ryan. So while this is just going, have to get to class. All right, Jim, have a great class, man. Thanks for coming by. And we can go about this. I'm just going through some of the questions. I have a question. If you have an alpha and I draw it out using the drag rec, how can I freeform move that mask? Awesome. Just as it can click curve, brush, draw it out, and move it with spacebar. Oh, so you're in essence a brush you want to draw out and move it around. After when this is done, I would probably, because it's a hard surface piece, it doesn't need to bend. I'd probably actually decimate this. And then, so you can see this one still has problems. It's showing issues. So this one I know has issues. So it's a great example. So it's going to create the piece, right? And then show me this top one has some issues still to it. And see all the other pieces where it says 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, 1, those were created. But I got pieces in here, and this is why we've created this capability. And you can see what the issues. I already know what the issues are with this gun. It's me. I made some really bad geometry in here on that piece right there. So I just need to fix that piece, right? So looking at this piece, it's got like an inner portion inside, right? See? Non-manifolding. I need to fix that. It's an easy fix. But that's the beauty of this system. If there is a problem, we can tell you, and then you can go about fixing it, and then you can Boolean that, right? So I would, like I said to the question, this is hard surface, right? So yeah, I could remesh this. I could dynamesh this. This would probably dynamesh fine. But the problem you might get in dynamesh is if you start having any very fine detailing and cut lines through here. So me, I'd probably just decimate this because it's hard. It doesn't need to bend. Okay, and then you can go. So the shortcut to transfer between the gizmo and the transpose line is Y. That's how you cut in between them. Okay. No, we're not planning on retiring the old line. So to this person's question also, I forget who asked it. Let's just go here. Let's go with a better surface. Let's take this one. So they wanted to do something like insert mesh brushing. Okay, I'm assuming is your question. So we're actually going to use these, which is our vector mesh brush, right? So now I can grab, say, something like this and draw it out, and I get that result with all the undercutting. Okay, it's pretty important, pretty cool, right? If I want to put this eyes on him here, I can do this. Now, your question is, you want to draw this out and like use the space bar to move it somewhere else, right? And don't forget, if you use negative, you get the negative results. Okay. So what you could do if you want, I forget who asked that question, just change your stroke to dot. First of all, you could just do that. And then now I can just drag this wherever I want. And then you can see the size of it is based upon my draw size. So if I go with a bigger draw size, I get a bigger eye. And then I can move this however I want. So this is how you could do something like that. Right? Does that make sense? I forgot who asked that question. I believe it was, hold on, I gotta scroll up to it. Menti MW if you're still here. Is that kind of what you were looking for? Is something like that? Because it needs the surface to interact with, right? So that's why it doesn't work with the spacebar, because you can constantly interact with the surface. Right now we're only dealing with 1.7 million, but if you were dealing with many more polygons, right, you're gonna need that reaction as well, right? So I can still do that and I'm fine. This is all you can, but then this is the new system where you can have undercutting and we can go nuts. Yes. Why not, dog nose? It's art. There. Happy trees. Right, so you can move this around and manipulate this how you want. So this is really the only thing that you can do that's close to like a space bar action, okay, with this. The only way to reduce anti-aliasing on the ZBrush document, if you want, in document, you can hit this AA half and then it'll reduce. And what it does is it takes the size of your document and cuts it in half and applies an anti-alias. But also don't use this. This is also, zoom is just like in Photoshop. You're zooming in pixelized, right? You don't want to do that. You want to keep it actual. So I always keep it in actual. But if you want to apply an anti-alias to document, you can do that. No, not at this time. You can't save Polypaint with the VDMs. Not yet. Yeah, so the question's coming in. You said we can decimate it. Decimating will not give you one whole mesh with only the visible faces. So you mean a watertight, that it's all welded together? Is that what you mean? I'm talking to Field Marshal. Is that what you're referring to? Is you want water tightness and then decimate it? Because there is a way to do that. Okay, so all you would do is just use the live booleans. Make everything union is all I would do. Yeah, I would. If you do a union, right, you're getting rid of that internal geometry, because wherever they're intersecting, like if there's an interlapping piece, we're going to have to get rid of that inner piece so that it can actually be unioned. Then decimate. That's how I would do that for that question. How do you export vector displacements? Well, I made all these from the plane, right? So I made them from here. And this is, if you guys are going to create VDMs for brushes, this is the process you have to do. Don't try to cut the corners, okay? You got to use a plane that has equally distributed polygons. And if I were you, I would probably go with just this plane, because they're already starting with some kind of, amount of polygons that are good. So you make this, right? And now you just start making whatever you want. It has to have this plane in order to make a VDM for the purpose of sculpting with this. Okay, it's got to have this grid, because there's a mathematical equation happening and it needs to know certain things, and this is one of the things. So obviously if I can create a nose. So one thing you guys want to be careful of, don't get too crazy, say at this stage. What I mean by that, don't just start doing this, right? Because you're stretching that geometry. However the geometry is here, that's how it's going to be when you draw it out. Okay? So if I really want to make a nose that's stretched, I would probably go up another level and slowly start stretching. So the geometry's slowly stretched out and it's not ton stretched out. Now, if you want to start manipulating this even more and fix this, right? You guys can do stuff like this now. I can mask off what's important to me, flip it, and I want this to be relaxed a little bit. So the in deformers now, there's relaxed to grid, right? And I can relax it, see, and it relaxes it. So see, it's redistributing the polygons. And of course, now this is being stretched because this is masked off. So if we go really blurry, you might not have such a stretch, see? And now this geometry is a lot better to work with, right? And then now I can continue stretching on this nose, but the geometry I'm getting, see, is nice equidistant, right? Compared to if we undo, let's get back to when it was stretched a lot, right? You can see how stretched it was. Because remember, this is going to be put into the brush and when you draw it on the surface. Okay? You guys got that? So you can work on it like this. This would be the process of creating the pieces. Okay, so creating a vector displacement out of ZBrush is down here. This is where you can create a vector displacement. So you would hit a tangent and you would create your vector displacement. Obviously, if I was doing this the right way, before I even started this little nose piece, going back, I would store first, a morph target at this stage where there's nothing been done to the plane. That's actually pretty important. Right? And then now I can export vector displacements. I can export a 32-bit. I turn this off, it's a 16-bit. Turn it off, it's a world. Turn it on, it's a tangent. And then you can smooth your UVs and also smooth the normals. No, you cannot remesh this. No. Very good question. You cannot remesh it. You can't dynamesh it. No. It has to stay this grid. It's very important. Again, there's math here and equations happening. Having these equidistant polygons is really important. That's what we're reading, seeing from a flat plane and seeing the difference, and we're just those vertex points. It's in essence like a grid pattern equation happening, so we know where the undercutting is happening. The minute you remesh it, you're getting now different size polygons and things, and it won't work. You have to stick with the plane. Okay, it's just the nature of the beast. It's what you have. Now, if you want to turn, say, something like this into an alpha, okay? So now if I go to my standard brush, all right, and I decide, hey, drag rec, and I want to convert this thing into an alpha, right? The difference here is this is now a mesh. It's not going to get the undercutting, right? Because it can't calculate that. It can't do the calculations to do all the undercutting to make this draw out correct. We're not at that point yet. Okay, so you still got to start with the plane. But what I can do, which is new to 4R8, okay, in the brush palette, alpha palette, right, I can now do a from mesh and a to mesh. Okay, so I can say from mesh, and now this little window will pop open, and it's asking, what way do you want this to be grabbed? You know, and now I can actually rotate this, make it smaller, make it bigger. What map size do I want? So I'm going to say 1024. Okay, and now and then I say okay, and then there you go. Now that I just made that into a brush, I'm going to say negative focal shift. Let's turn it way up, and you can see the difference. See, it's given it to me, but you see it can't get that undercutting. Right? There's no undercutting that can happen right there. Right? It can't calculate that and figure that out. Right? But now you have that capability to grab an alpha and actually manipulate it and change it. And what else is new to this, so you guys can see this, all right? So when I draw this out, we'll undo a bunch of these, right? And I draw that out, okay? It's pretty strong. Let's say that. I now, in the alpha palette, under modifier, there's a streak length here. So I can actually add little streaking lines to your alpha if you want to. Right? So the higher I go, the more streaks I get. So it can come in handy sometimes with a brush. You can start making it look like different brush stroking, right? And I can say, let's try a softer alpha, right? You can start creating some very interesting strokes here. And it's starting to give more like a brush feel, almost like a painterly brush. Okay, so there you go. And then yes, for your plane question, so anything you can go below the plane and above the plane. Okay, so when you guys are making these VDM, you can move below the plane. Just don't move the plane in space. Okay, because we're reading that. We're seeing where the plane sits in the world, and it's set at 0, 0, 0, 0. The minute you guys do this, it's no longer sitting at 0, 0. And what I'm doing is I'm pulling it off the world axis. We're going to see that and give that to you in the brush. That we have to calculate that. We have to figure that out, right? So you're going to have a brush that sticks off the surface with a big cube before you get your piece, and you're probably not going to want that. So the only thing to make sure is don't actually physically move the plane anywhere, right? And if we mess up, even to the point where we do stuff like this, right? And I've messed around with this, and then I'm pulling this out, and again, making a very quick nose, right? And then I divide, and we start doing this, start adding this part to her. Yes, yes, yes. Wee, right? You guys get the idea. You don't need to sit here and watch me sculpt. You don't really want to either. It's not a good thought. Okay, so this has kind of been messed around and ruined, right? So especially the edges. So what I can do, right, is mask this off, the portion that's important to me, which is the nose. Maybe blur it a little bit. Okay. While the geometry is twisted and affected, that's going to be in your brush. Okay. So now I can just go to deformation, and I can say morph to grid, and it's going to put it back to its perfect grid and not touch the middle part. I'm just catching up with 3:10:30's question. Yes, the plane is in, this plane that I'm loading is in the proper 0 to 1 UV space. Yes. And all the vertexes are uniform. Yes. So you can export that VDM and actually import that VDM if you want to, right? That's kind of what I'm doing with here. If I go import, and I have a VDM here of my dog nose as an example. Okay, so here is a vector displacement from ZBrush. Okay, and what we've added here is now you can do to mesh or even from mesh. Okay, so and then there's also displacement scale. So I'm going to set this to 0.5 because for my dog that was the right setting for me. And I'm going to say to mesh, and then there's my dog. So I can even bring in a vector displacement map and convert it inside of ZBrush. And then now we can turn this now into a brush, right? All I have to do is, here, let's add it to this chisel brush here. Okay, and now I can say brush from mesh, right? And then now it's taking this nose again and adding it to the end. What's the purpose of relax plane again? Okay, so again, here's the purpose of relax plane. You might have missed it. Okay, so you can see like all this geometry, right? And specifically, if I start doing crazy, like really pulling on the mesh, right, like this, right? You can see these in here, they're really being pulled on quite a bit. Okay, so I can say relax plane grid and see it's relaxing it and making the geometry more equally distributed. Because that's important when you go to draw it out. You would want that equally distributed as much as possible. So that's the point of that. Then, of course, this little circle means there's two algorithms. So I close it. The algorithm's not as strong. It's a very different algorithm. Right? And see, now it's trying to fix all the geometry automatically for us. But you see all this twist in geometry? That's going to be in the brush. So you might want to start fixing this, right? And find out where do you want the mask to be. So I would mask off the area that's really important to me. And then probably blur it a couple times. Right? And then use that capability to reset. That's what this morph to grid is doing. It's resetting it to the grid. And see, now I've got nice equally distributed, and now maybe I'll just even it out a little bit more. And then now I'm going to get a nice drawing out of this. Right? So now I can say, oh, this is just gorgeous. Wonderful piece. Just a wonderful piece. Right? So I got an inner portion in there. So I can take this and go back now to, let's put it on this brush. So I'm looking straight on, brush from mesh, there it is. Now we go to this guy, let's say, and then now I want to draw it out, right? And then there you have it. So we'll switch back to drag rec, and now I can drag out what I got. See, now it's only giving me that little boxy lump and then the nose. That's all it's giving me. right? So the important part here to you guys is don't move it. Make sure your embed here is always at 0, right? Try to keep your plane equally distributed in polygons as much as possible, okay? And go from there. I couldn't say about Gardeau. You're asking about future development. Unfortunately, I couldn't say if voxels will ever be added or not to ZBrush. So this allows a lot of opening, obviously. That's how all these were made. I just made them on a plane. If you want to see they look like, you guys can grab any one of these. So like people were asking about the positive, negative. Here's like the mouth I made with a mouth stack. So if I want to see what that looks like, I can go to brush and I can say here to mesh, and then there it is. So this is the actual plane piece and how I made it. Right? Pretty simple, straightforward, not too difficult. And now I have that I can add to that. If I want to return a plane to 000 part of the world, here, I'll show you how to do that. Okay, so there's multiple ways to do it, right? Sitting at the end of the world. You guys know now you can hit this house. There it's sitting at the world. That's what that house icon is doing in the gizmo. It moves the mesh to the world. If I hold the Alt key or on lock and hit home, it just only moves the gizmo. Okay? Or, excuse me, in geometry, okay, your position's right here. So there's what you might all be used to is X, Y, Z's, right? And I can just zero these all out. Zero them up. Zero it out, and you're sitting at the center of the world. Obviously, now I would just use the house. It's way faster. Okay? Or the third way is using Unify. But Unify not only puts it to the center of the world, also physically changes the size of your mesh. Okay? I'm just reading a question from Leslie. Have you gone over the scaling consistency for insert mesh replacement yet? Mine seemed to be randomly scaled after I tried to replace an active. Yeah, you've activated a feature actually. So I'm assuming this is what I'm going to assume this is what's happened to you. Let's see if I can do what's happening to you. What I think's happening to you. Let's go to this. Let's say this. Okay, let's draw this out. Let's not have solo. I draw this out, right? And if you do this, and I've manipulated, right? Now, if I cycle through, everything's fine. Okay, you see everything's fine. Now, however, if I hold shift, right, and cycle through, they're going to start taking on the values of what I did to the previous mesh. Is that what's happening to you? So just click and see it'll update to the correct scale of the insert mesh brush. However, if I do something crazy like this and like that, and then like this and like that, right? And if I hold shift, every piece gets updated to that stretching point. Because there's times maybe I do want to stretch things and I want the next piece, right? Because if you guys remember this workflow, control and I can copy, right? And then now I want the next piece to have that same stretch value. That's important because I might be matching something to it, and then copy this and then hold shift and click that. I want that having the same stretch values. If I don't, then I just tap and now it's back to normal. So that is the only thing I can think of where inconsistency of a scale would happen. Otherwise, the only other thing would be if you have a deformer still on, right? If I go here and I turn on a deformer, right? And notice deformers take on the axis points, right? So we'll make it symmetrical and this, and whoops. I'm used to being on a Mac. Window key. And then now you can start doing this symmetrically, right? And if you notice, it's on an angle because this is on an angle. So this is really nice for things like, oh, I want to maybe slice, right? Or say, all right, this is what I want. But what I want is a deformer on this angle, and I'm going to use the flatten. And see, now it's on an angle, so now I'm actually flattened on an angle. Right? And then I can do this symmetrically, right? And I can have both sides. I can throw a slice on it, do things like that, and then this is not symmetrical, right? And then I can say I want the x-axis also to be symmetrical. And you can do stuff like that, right? Which key is, think about this. I have a piece here. Let's reset one of these pieces. Let's grab this again, right? The gizmo becomes a very strong controller for us. So do I want the deformer to be perfectly squared, or do I want the deformer to kind of be on an angle like that, then apply my deformer, right? Maybe in a bend curve, right? And see, now the bend points are coming this way, right? So how do I want those? Here, I'll add more points across there, right? What axis, right? And now I have this bend curve, and I can do this. And I say, oh, that's way too many points. 3 is enough. And you start doing all this bending. And then smooth it a little bit, transitional. Right, this really starts opening up a lot of things, okay, to us. But it's not just about, right, having squared on. We can now do everything. All these things can be. You know, I really love the extender. Man, I did so much fun stuff with this, right? Just even taking something as simple as this, right? I'm going to make that a polymesh. Let's look at it this way. Let's say an extender, right? I want it symmetrical here. Okay, the resolution's good enough for now. And extend, and you know what? I want it symmetrical this way and extend. Like getting this shape for me back in the day was like, right? And what's cool is, okay, I dig that one. Hit the gear is yellow. I can accept it if I want. Hit the gear and say, now let's use the multi-slice. Right? So this was a lot of fun for me to play with as well. Okay, so I can say, what slice width and resolution do I want? So I'm going to say I want the slice width and a resolution, maybe, let's do a resolution of 12 and do the width at, say, 0.2. Okay? And I want that also at here. So I want a resolution of 12 and let's say 0.2. See, so this is now, but watch, I can move this wherever I want, move it up higher, move it lower. I can snap it to all 3 axis points, this little blue dot. Okay, and this is where I was like, oh man, this is fun. And then Z Modeler, my Bob Ross moments. I say polygroup all. Let's do an inset polygroup all. Let's inset these. Change our polygroup on the fly so you can visually really see what's happening here. Okay, now I got it going on both sides because it's the same polygroup. Bonus, let's do a Q mesh, all polygroups, do that. Right, and then watch, I'm going to say, it's getting cool, but let's have some more fun with this. Let's also go back and throw another extender on this. Right, and then now, boom. Boom. Now these 4 things are sitting in the corner, right? Now I can get stuff like that. Right? There's just the possibilities start to grow so much for me just playing around with this. Right? And I can move them anywhere I want. So I can make it all be like that. I can make it however I want. I move and I put that extender where I want it to go. So it's just a lot of freedom for me. So this was a really fun thing that I started to do, is just taking some random shapes and seeing really how far can I push these to get pieces like that. Yeah, it'll respect masking and growing. It's extender. I see someone got it for you. Okay. So, man, we gotta go. We've been here now for 2 hours and 10 minutes. Man, thank everybody for tuning in. Let's see what our next topic is going to be. It looks like live booleans is the winner at 43%. So we will, the next Did You Know That? Again, for those that are just joining us now, I ask you guys, the user base, we have 4 possibilities. You guys vote on what it'll be, and then we'll go in there. So in 2 weeks, I'll dive more into the Booleans and show you more examples with hard surfacing, things like that. And also, don't forget, next Tuesday is Joseph Drust. He's pretty much probably going to do the same thing. He does Ask ZBrush, so there's probably already questions, and he's going to answer them there live in the stream, and then he'll do what I'm doing and even ask you guys, okay, what else do you guys want to see? Okay, and this will automatically upload to YouTube and our Twitch channel for you guys. Okay, so again, we're really looking forward and seeing what everyone creates with 4R8. There is a schedule online. It's right here on our Twitch channel is the schedule. So you can see it if you scroll down towards the bottom. You'll be able to see the schedule. How long have I been using ZBrush? Axel, it's a good question. So, I don't want to leave. I just want to hang out now. Oh, so no Joseph next. Oh, that's right. Joseph's on vacation. There is no Joseph next week. All right. You know what? Maybe I'll jump on. How about that? You guys want me to jump on again at the same time frame next Tuesday? We can do that if you want. I'll take Joseph's slot as well, so you guys don't miss out every week getting either myself or Joseph. All right, I'll jump on next Tuesday. So, anyways, I've been using ZBrush for, let's see, I discovered it at a SIGGRAPH. I want to say that was SIGGRAPH 2006. Taught it to myself, just started really working with it, and then I really sat down, and actually what I did is try to break the features, and it helped me learn the features, and then learn how I can layer certain features on top of themselves to get to an end result really fast. So when I was already graduated, so I didn't go to school to learn ZBrush, but I currently teach ZBrush at several schools. Okay, Francisco, you're welcome, my man. Enjoy the Studio Pro. Joseph's backyard. Hashtag Joseph's backyard. Definitely. So for those that weren't in the stream, the release stream, it was an ongoing joke because Joseph kept bringing stuff up from his backyard. When I was a wee boy, Garrett says, nice. I wasn't that small. Yes, I am responsible for these features. I'm in the development team, just like Joseph Drust. There's several other people in the development team. But yes, anything that gets put in ZBrush, it lands on my desk and several other people before it gets implemented. And you know, I do a lot of touring in and out of studios, seeing what they're doing, pipelines. You got to remember too, ZBrush is being used in a lot of different industries. So we're taking all that information and figuring out features that we can make that can really spread across many industries. Unfortunately, I don't have any stuff from Joseph's backyard to bring. But maybe Joseph will make that his theme when he comes back. You never know. So, thanks again. Thanks for tuning in. It's been great. Thanks for hanging around with me. Looks like, again, we'll dive into live Booleans even more and really hit like nanomesh with it, revisit ray mesh, talk again more about multiple subdivision levels. And if you guys have also specific examples and questions, hey Paul, I want to create this. How would you do it? You can send an email to streaming@pixelogic.com. Again, that's streaming@pixel. I'm going to put it in the chat for us at pixelogic.com. Keyboard. All right. So if you have even something in particular for the Booleans, you want to say, hey, how would you create this? Obviously, it's something very complex. I might not be able to throw that together fast enough because obviously I have other things going on besides preparing for time with you guys. If I could, I would just sit here and you guys would just be over the shoulder and we would just all work together. That would be... okay. Fine, Axel. If that's what you want. If homework stuff. Yes, Joseph's call sign is Piggy Son. Or where it came from? I'll let you ask him that because I actually asked him that once. Where the heck Piggy Son came from? The next time he streams, ask him. He'll give you the story. All right. Thanks, guys, so much. This has been awesome. Really appreciate it. Have a wonderful day. We'll see you on the next stream.